Alrighty, we are ready to re-engage. I don't know if we have a council quorum. I can't see based on the way this thing is laid out. Let's see.
There are three of us here.
Cool. Who's here? We've got Councilor Hill, Councilor Snook, and who's the other?
Councilor Payne?
I'm here.
Right. Councilor Hill, is the council in order?
Yes, we are, sir. Council
in order. Let's go ahead and begin. So the first item on our docket is CP 21-00002. This is a comprehensive plan amendment to the current comprehensive plan of the 2013 plan. The item is the Star Hill Neighborhood Community Vision Plan. The area in consideration is approximately 48 acres and includes the city yard, the Star Hill residential neighborhood, the Jefferson School, and all the streets that are adjacent to the area. Keyword, this is a vision plan, vision being the keyword here. This is not a small area plan. The vision plan is intended to provide a set of principles that will help us in decision-making as it relates to the area involved. It does not give us a detailed maximization of the available zoning, or does not give us detailed land use planning, but only it's a vision that helps to guide decision-making. The other things will come a little later. What we've been asked to do is to recommend to council whether they should approve with amendments or deny the vision plan. And I'm not sure if Mr. Akapuna is taking the lead and then tossing it over to Ms. Errol, or how are we doing this?
Yeah, that's Mr. Chair. Good evening, and thank you for the overview. Councilors, I'm going to provide overview of the staff report and how the process started, and then I'll turn it over to the CEO of New Hill Development Corporation, Yolanda Harrell, and then she can introduce her associates. On November 18th, 2019, the City Council, after receiving the draft small area plan, passed a resolution, to transmit the plan to the Planning Commission for review and consideration. On December 20th, planning staff reviewed the plan and then determined as a result of the scope of work that the plan did not contain all the necessary land use components, to warrant adoption of the plan as a small area plan. So it was agreed, that the plan will be advanced to the Planning Commission and subsequently to the City Council as a community vision plan. On August 11, the draft of the plan was presented to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission reviewed the plan, provided some guidance and comments, and the consultant went back and then updated the plan. So what you have before you right now took into consideration the feedback received by the consultant from the Planning Commission on August 11th, 2020. The plan is consistent with the several goals of the comprehensive plan and includes a community vision and guiding principles necessary to guide the implementation of the plan. What staff is asking the Planning Commission tonight, it's to approve the attached resolution to amend the 2013 comprehensive plan to include the Star Hill Vision Plan. The consultant team is here. Again, they have a short presentation, and I will turn it over to Yolanda Harrell, who is the CEO of New Hill Development Corporation. Yolanda.
Thank you, Mr. Akapuna. Good evening, councilors, commissioners, and neighbors. I hope you all were able to enjoy some of this beautiful sunshine we had today, or at least if you'll get a chance to enjoy it sometime this week. As was stated, my name is Yolanda Harrell, and on behalf of the community neighbors and partners that participated in developing this plan, New Hill Development Corporation, LISC, Floricane, and RW Ventures, we would like to say thank you for the opportunity to once again come before you to discuss the Star Hill Neighborhood Community Vision Plan. Since you all have had the opportunity to review the plan, we wanted to use our time to cover the major themes and, of course, the envisioned outcomes. So let us begin. Next slide, please. In short, the question of who benefits from the Star Hill Vision Plan, it's the community. Next slide, please. This plan intentionally centers the Black community, not to the exclusion of others, but rather to intentionally, the intentional inclusion of us. The plan specifically looks at opportunities to increase the street level presence of sustainable, well-capitalized, existing and startup Black-owned businesses. We've envisioned co-ownership opportunities, industry-specific accelerators, and addressing the financing gaps, which means friendlier capital ranging between anywhere from the $50,000 to $200,000 range. Next slide, please. This plan also imagines future housing options across a wide range of affordability to include rental and ownership opportunities. Whether you're a first-time home buyer or a voucher holder or someone looking for the next phase of housing along their financial growth path, in this plan, we have demonstrated how those opportunities can and will exist. Next slide, please. This plan explores how to build upon the African American Heritage Center's tremendous work of curation of local history and art, moving it beyond the doors and into the built environment. The plan elevates and centers the Jefferson School City Center and the Jefferson School Foundation's desire to sustain the Jefferson School, to enhance its vitality and importance as a cultural, educational, and community resource. This plan also speaks to the need for gathering spaces where folks can connect or just be, where they are empowered to congregate and co-create, build and own and innovate and learn. The community has envisioned a culturally distinctive neighborhood with not only financial, but also social accessible community spaces and activities. Next slide, please. So as we mentioned earlier, this plan envisions what housing possibilities could look like in this area. Through the engagement process and the examination of the existing community assets, City Yard by far offers the greatest opportunities to address the housing needs. While City Yard represents a genuine opportunity for new affordable housing as part of a mixed-use development, Star Hill's existing residential neighborhood must be sustained and strengthened. This plan is committed to encouraging that homeowners in Star Hill can afford to stay in their homes, that measures are taken to alleviate vehicular and parking pressures within the neighborhood, and that residents have a strong and active voice in Star Hill's continued development going forward. So, how much housing is going to be created? Next slide, please. The plan looks at what can be done immediately, which is creating housing on Brown Street, thus shoring up and strengthening the integrity of the existing residential neighborhood. This can be done while we explore other opportunities in the larger plan. Through the subdivision of City Yard in the immediate, you could see at a minimum an additional 10 to 46 units of new housing to include new home ownership opportunities for first-time home buyers. Next slide, please. In the larger parcel, there are more possibilities available. Now, what we have proposed is simply a vision of what could be done considering the existing easements. In the pre-development phase of this property, that's where the exploration of options with the community and city will occur. But if we just look at what is proposed in this vision, our city could gain upwards of 250 additional housing units, not to mention the additional office and retail space, excuse me. Next slide, please. Based on the proposed vision, this slide shows a possibility of what can be done with City Yard. Next slide, please. So, what does this mean for our community from a jobs perspective? Well, let's see. Next slide, please. Based on the current vision proposed in this plan of what could be built on City Yard, this plan could create a considerable amount of job opportunities, upwards of 1,400 jobs. Some of those jobs would be during and some of those would be after the construction process. But not only will it create jobs, those jobs will translate into revenue for local small businesses, which of course translates into tax revenue for the city. And of course, let us not forget about the additional tax revenue once the area is built out. Next slide, please. So what has been added since we came before this commission back in 2020? Well, we have addressed one very important aspect of what makes this community and the life in this community so very special for many. And we've also included one big idea. Next slide, please. Since our last meeting, we were able to meet with leadership from First Baptist, Ebenezer, and Pilgrim Baptist churches to understand more about their hopes, their dreams, and concerns for the future of their church and the surrounding community, which has been included in this latest iteration of the plan. The resounding top two themes of concern we heard were around repopulation of the church and parking. In this latest edition, we have suggested a minimum parking allocation of 50 spaces for First Baptist Church. As I know you are very much aware, there is very little on-site parking for First Baptist. Additionally, Main Street will lose parking spaces, and without a parking plan, this church's very survival is at stake. Currently, the church rents 50 parking spaces for Sunday services. Should and when the Amtrak parking lot become home to new construction, taking into consideration this is currently the main reliable parking available for the church's congregation, an allocation of spaces for the church is absolutely necessary. Growth of the residential community was deemed very positive by the churches because it presents an opportunity to address the repopulation concerns. Pilgrim Baptist has a Montessori school in the works, and First Lady Cooper was thrilled at the possibility to support additional families with the convenience of an early childhood education center within walking distance. We have also included some of the history of the current churches and history to remind us of the churches that were once present. Now, however, we have received some additional information and documents over the last couple of days that has helped to inform more of that history, which we will address. We will work with Ms. Jane Smith and the Heritage Center to ensure we have an accurate depiction of the local history in this area. Next slide, please. And finally, the big idea. As my partner Shelley would say, if the mind could dream, what would it do? Well, there is an important opportunity to restore and strengthen the connections between Star Hill to the broader network of neighborhoods from West Haven, 10th and Page to Rose Hill to the downtown mall. That's what the pedestrian bridge offers. Other ideas to consider as we plan the future of this area and the future of our city. Could this provide us with more connectivity from neighborhoods to the downtown area, creating more opportunities for safer mobility for our pedestrians? And through connectivity, can they also be works of art? So I'll end with this. This vision of a Star Hill area community whose future growth is guided by a commitment to racial, economic, and social equity. We will create a neighborhood identity rooted in African-American presence and prosperity with real opportunities for the Black community to foster ownership of property, commerce, and culture. And with that, thank you for your time, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Excellent. So let's do this a little different. Let's start from the right and go to the left. And then after every commissioner's got a chance, we'll just kind of open it up for questions from all the commissioners and even council. So Mr. Leandra, do you have any questions?
Questions.
You'll get a chance to pontificate later, but
Okay, good, because and so by questions also a concern or something that I think might have been valuable to have in here. Is that something I should bring up now?
sure.
So Ms. Harrell, thank you for the presentation. And I noticed that the mention, there is a mention of the Main Street, West Main Street Historic District in the appendix. And it seems to me it could possibly be considered as one of the economic strategies also, by noting that most of the buildings that are in the Star Hill study area on this part of West Main Street are contributing members to that historic district. And with investment tax credits, there's available about 50% of whatever's invested in these historic buildings to rehabilitate them. And to my mind, that accomplishes a couple of things. As an economic advantage to those who do that work and own the buildings, but it's also a way of ensuring that the existing fabric and is importantly the historic fabric of the community is preserved. So I just wanted to point that out as an opportunity that I would just suggest that you all consider. And that's other than that, I have some comments, but they can wait till I pontificate.
Mr. Soliates.
We had some comment from the public, former councilor Kathy Galvin, discussing the project. And one point that she focused on was the connection between Star Hill and downtown, which I agree is absolutely crucial. Can you speak to that?
Absolutely. So one of the things that, as we were going through this process, obviously we looked back at some of the history and met with a number of people, just kind of talk about what past plans and, when the downtown mall was originally built, what was some of the ideas that it had in mind in terms of connectivity all the way out to the neighborhoods. However, those things weren't realized. As we look at this plan, one of the things that we tried to do was to look at centering, kind of creating a public square that centers the Jefferson School, but then bringing that square across the street over to the downtown mall so that you can see how this area can all connect and flow together. We even included calming traffic patterns at some of the major intersections so that we could have a better sense of pedestrians as they are, attempting to cross the roads. Of course, we know all too well here in our city how significant that can be, especially with the number of accidents that we've seen, just with pedestrians trying to cross our streets. And so we wanted to make sure that we added those calming traffic patterns so that, again, that it encourages connectivity and encourages people to walk. We talked about opening up the tunnel that leads between 10th and Page neighborhood and the Star Hill area. Of course, that tunnel does sit on City Yard. And so in order for that tunnel to be open, you would have to open up City Yard. And then we also looked at the abandoned or the unused rail spur that runs along the backside of the community as a way to, again, help promote connectivity between the communities as well as to the downtown area, giving pedestrians a safer way to travel, to be able to encourage us to see more of a community that we're not in these isolation spaces from each other, but that one neighborhood can flow gently into another neighborhood. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
And on to Ms. Dow.
I don't have any questions at this time.
And Reverend Eaton.
Yeah, I also had some questions about the traffic calming measures. I mean, there's so many options now. A lot of different communities have been very creative. Was any thought put into some kind of, excuse me, pedestrian overwalk?
Well, actually, I'm sorry.
Okay, I know that's a large infrastructure investment, but that is probably the best way to keep people safe.
And so that was the last slide of our presentation, and that's what part of what we added as our last big idea. Mr. Yates actually brought that up in our last meeting. And it was something that we had considered when we were doing this, and we thought, well, should we put that in there? And so we were really greatly encouraged when a number of folks said, hey, what about an overpass? And so we did put in there ideas around, as we think about the built area and as we think about the future of this area, what would it look like to have these beautiful pedestrian bridges, but not just to have just a plain bridge, like make sure that it's something that, there you go, make sure that it's something that's beautiful, that it's works of art, that it's something that, you know, helps us to envision what the possibilities could be.
Okay, but specific other communities and other places that have done this, you didn't really settle on an idea or a architectural rendering.
No, we didn't. I mean, again, this is a vision plan, so it's designed to give you the idea of things that can be done, so that as we're thinking and as we're planning this particular area, as it gets developed out, these are things that should be taken into consideration. And so the pedestrian bridge speaks to the idea of this would be a great opportunity in this area, because not only does it serve as a means to help connect us to the downtown area better and safer, but it also can, you know, serve as a marker, as an entry point as you're coming into that area. It's also been used as a means of being able to convey information in other cities. And so this is just one picture. In the plan itself, we have several different ideas around it, but no, we didn't settle on anything specific, but just wanted to bring to light the idea of what could be done.
Yeah, no, you just answered my question that it would be a major entryway, gateway feature of the city, so it would need a lot of creativity. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Stolzenberg.
Thanks, and good presentation. I guess I'd like to continue on the talk of connectivity, and thinking a little bit less about the kind of longer term or large scale vision of the bridges, and more about kind of the street level and maybe near term easier wins. I know last time we talked about how you know, in this area there are a lot of demand paths of kind of like dirt trodden through, like, you know, median and lawn areas where people, you know, need to get from A to B, and right now there really isn't any sidewalk or pedestrian infrastructure to get there. And thinking about, or I guess my question is, you know, have you guys given any more thought to how we can kind of formalize those into real infrastructure? You know, the one by the corner of the Omni lot, and then again at 4th Street at the corner of the McDonald's lot are the ones that really come to mind for me, because that's where I walk most of the time. But both, you know, in order to make those, you know, actual infrastructure and accessible and compliant, which probably requires, you know, working with the property owners, and then, you know, where they connect to, like the crosswalks, you know, in particular the one at the Omni, I think it has no lights, and it goes kind of right into a driveway with no sidewalks. Is there an avenue to potentially get some easy wins by hardening those crosswalks and making that infrastructure relatively on the cheap?
Absolutely, and we actually speak to that inside the plan where we are, where we suggest some of those same intersections that you're speaking of, where there's an opportunity to, and we demonstrate in there, we put some examples of how, just how you can either use pavers and you can use art so that you can really brighten up those intersections to really just really kind of train the traffic to be more observant of pedestrians that are coming through that space. One of the things that we also talked about is along Commerce Street, because right now, when you go down Commerce Street, you don't really have sidewalks or, it's not really a pedestrian friendly street. We even talk about how could you potentially make that even more of a vibrant space? Because one, it's also the entry point to the African American Heritage Center. So how could we make this more vibrant and encourage more pedestrian traffic through that area? Putting in pavers and adding sidewalks, those kinds of things could really help to reorient the way we think about that space. And again, at the major intersections, we do talk about if we can use paint, we can use pavers, but we really need to highlight that space so that as people are coming upon them, that they're really thinking about the fact that, hey, this is where pedestrians are most likely to be. Let me make sure I slow up. Those are some things that we could do right now as some early wins.
Cool. Yeah, I love that idea. That sounds great to me. I guess my other question, in terms of kind of the relocation of the city yard, which it seems is something of a prerequisite for a lot of the larger goals here. Have there been discussions, maybe this is more of a question for staff, about so I really love the idea of kind of shaving or squaring off the corner to create that land on Brown Street. And then there's some talk about kind of relocating in the administrative building. But for the industrial parts of the yard, have there been plans and consideration of what it will take to move that? I think there's talk about moving to Avon or something, and how much money that would cost, what the timeline would be, and how to get it done.
So when we were going through this process, one of the things that we were aware of was that there had been a study that was done years ago on the feasibility of relocating the city yard out to Avon Street. Mm-hmm. And so, unfortunately, during this process, we were never able to really see the study. So we can't really speak a whole lot to the study itself. However, part of the reason why we suggested the subdivision of City Yard is because that portion that could be added to the existing, to expand the existing neighborhood of Star Hill, that particular portion of City Yard is it's just parking lot. It wouldn't really pose that much of a inconvenience in our opinion. I'm sure others may disagree. If you were to subdivide that piece off while we're working on the larger pieces of redevelopment of the larger parcel of land. So that's how you can get that early win in. You can also, what we show is that you can create two streets. You can have one row of housing right there along Brown Street, another row of housing behind it, and then a little small multi-family that could go down based on the topography of the land in that area. But what that also would do is that it would allow us to be able to open up that tunnel as well that connects the 10th and Page and West Haven communities to the Star Hill community. And so in right now, while we're figuring out the larger piece, then you can go ahead and get some housing to help address some of the housing needs that we have in the city. Now, as it relates to moving that land, that's one of the things I think that once we get to a place where we have our city staff back in at the senior level secured, I think that's where we can begin to have those next level of conversations. Because when we started this process several years ago, we were having this conversation with Maurice Jones. So As you can imagine, there's been a few iterations of city managers since then. And so for us, it's more of like kind of once we get to a place, when we started it with him, it was around, well, let's think about first what we could do before we get into the steps of like, how do we move City Yard to another place? And so that's how we came to do the vision for this particular area. It was starting that process. So now we have a vision. Now the next steps is, okay, so what would it take? And I think, this is a great moment and opportunity to look at other cities that have done it. One in particular, Greenville, South Carolina, they moved their city yard that was in the heart of their city by a river, and they've moved it, out to their county space. It cost them about $26 million to do it when they did it. Obviously, prices are different between the areas, and of course, in the post-pandemic or during this pandemic, prices are really different. But that kind of gives you some idea of what it could potentially cost in terms of moving. But one of the reasons why very early on we brought in partners like LISC and like other foundations that we've had conversations with was to talk about how could we support that? Because our vision when we started this process was never for this to be something that became the sole burden of the city to figure out. That's where the partnership comes in, where we work with you and we bring other partners to the table that do this all around the country, help figure these things out, not only help figure them out, but also help bring the financial resources to bear to make it happen. And so that's where we would like to see this go next, is to start ordering those steps.
Cool. That sounds good. And I guess I'm out of time, but real quick, if Chair Mitchell's okay with it, what was the deal with the study? Was it like missing, or is it like confidential?
I'm not sure. That we asked for it and it was never provided to us.
Gotcha. Okay. Thanks.
You're welcome.
And Ms. Ruskell.
Following up on that, I also read that there was an environmental remediation study approved in fiscal year 20. Are we talking about the same thing, or is that something in addition?
No.
Personally, I haven't seen any remediation reports. If there is one, it wasn't sent to NDS. It has to be at Public Works. And we have a new Public Works Director, the previous Public Works Director, Paul Obadofa, and also the Assistant City Manager for Operations. He has he's pretty in the middle of the whole discussion. So like Yolanda said, I think after the COVID-19, the new city manager, we have to perhaps pick up where everybody else left, and then continue with also the new Public Works Director. But in terms of the remediation report, I haven't seen anything.
Okay, well, it sounds like we could probably run that to ground pretty easily. If the $300,000 wasn't spent, we can be sure it doesn't exist. I think just one question and then my other questions are more sort of to pose to Planning Commission and staff. But I was curious if you could speak to impacts to the vision plan kind of and how they relate to whether West Main is or isn't carried out in full. I know one of the things I read was about a proposed parking structure in the park of Star Hill, which just seems like let's not do that. And if that isn't carried out in West Main, then obviously that's not a conflict. But were there any other like mismatches that you were aware of?
Well, our suggestion was please don't give up that park because there's very little green space. I mean, that's really the major green space in that particular community there. And part of what the community talked about was, well, if we had to give it up in order to support parking, because there is a huge pressure on that particular community. The streets are very narrow, and because of just the growing area and what they're seeing is that a lot of people are coming into their neighborhood and parking. And so some of the things that we suggested was like, we've got to have some enforcement in that area so that folks should be able to park in front of their own home or at least near it. And then also that if you were to, give up the park, that you had to have another park someplace else. So don't give up that park until you get a park. If City Yard comes available, then you create another park in that space. Also, the fact that the West Street Mainscape was going to get rid of 32 parking spaces, again, that was going to further drive the needs of that particular community. And so part of what we thought about was when you look at the tray of parking for the Jefferson School, that original parking deck was supposed to be 3 levels. And of course, when they were doing that particular renovation or that addition, it was post the financial crisis of 2008, the real estate crisis. And so there had to be some cuts made. And so what they decided to do was just make it a 2-level garage. So it has the ability to support another tray of parking. That's how you could, one, help support that particular community, but then also any future built opportunities that would exist on City Yard that could also help to bring some support in terms of parking to that particular community.
Sure, thanks. One thing I just remembered, and Jody's point about rehabilitation tax credits at West Main, I believe that Star Hill being is eligible for listing certain as a district. And so I think that would make it some of those structures potentially eligible for the rehabilitation tax credit program as well.
Absolutely. And
listed.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, no, go.
I was going to say that, what we did as we looked at the various strategies of things that could potentially be done, that's kind of woven throughout the body of the vision plan. In there, we talk about different ways that things can be financed, and you'll find some more of that stuff in the appendix. But we do talk to the fact that, there's obviously tax credits and historical tax credits and rehabilitative credits and those kinds of things that can be brought to bear in order to ensure that, we're able to redevelop this area where those, especially for individuals that own spaces that are historical, that those are means that you can utilize in order to make that happen.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Mr. Palmer, any thoughts, any questions?
Yeah, I mean, I guess thinking more along the lines of questions, I just like a nuts and bolts question in the slides. You used the term majority affordable a couple times. I was just curious, like, what exactly that meant. So, I mean, I assume it's like a mix of market rate and maybe affordable, but I didn't know if you had some thought of that, what that mix is.
Absolutely. I mean, when we thought about this, our goal was to try to go as deep as we could in the AMIs, is, and also looking at what else was happening around in our community. And so in order to truly make this into a mixed income community, go as low as 40% AMI up to your market rate, so that, one of the new things that they are allowing you to do with LIHTC is that you can do the income averaging. And so with that, as long as it averages out to 60% AMI, then you're in compliance with what you are able to do. So we thought about what, when it comes down to financing and how do you pay for things, because our goal in doing this was to make sure that we created housing along a spectrum, not just at one particular phase of someone's financial path, but to make sure that there was a way for individuals to be able to grow along that financial path. And if they wanted to change housing, they could. But if they definitely want to have ownership opportunities, we wanted to make sure that exists, and not just at the high level, but at a level that really allows more people to participate in owning opportunities here in Charlottesville.
Great. Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, the other question is kind of question and comment. I was also thinking about the Star Hill Park and noticing that city parking lot that abuts it, and kind of just the idea that you have kind of this like publicly owned swath that goes from the the city yard and then up through the park and the parking lot. I didn't really see that in the plan as kind of a big idea or anything. I don't know how much you guys thought about that as kind of like another kind of big move in that space, given the public ownership of the property there, or if the parking that's in the parking lot was just deemed a little too political right now. I don't know. It's valuable as parking for sure, but you know, other opportunity.
So we have a section on reimagining Star Hill Park. One of the things that in talking with the neighbors and doing the, you know, either the engagements or front porch interviews was the fact that, you know, they didn't want their green space to go away. But we also, when talking with some of the community members of the churches that had once upon a time had like after school programs, and they would bring the youth over to the park, that there's nothing really there in the park, you know, to really create gathering in that park. And so right now, you know, some folks that have pets, they kind of use it as their, you know, little dog park, but that's pretty much it. You've got 2 benches that are in that park. And so our goal is to say, let's reimagine this. Let's really turn it into something that's usable, that really encourages gathering. One of the neighbors from the Star Hill community, she talked about how frustrating it was that there was no place for her to go and just sit and have a conversation. If she walked up the main street, then she would be at someone's, you know, establishment. So she would need to she would have to buy something in order to just be there and to sit and have a conversation. Or even if she, you know, walked further over, like there was just no places really for just to be in that neighborhood where you can go outside and just go and walk and sit and enjoy the day. And so that's part of what we're saying to envision with that particular parcel is to really rethink that park, because it really could, you know, be more beneficial for that community, for the now and for the future community.
Definitely. Okay, yeah, I think that's it for questions. But thanks, I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer.
Right, are there any other questions from the commissioners? Rory, you had a clarifying thought.
Yeah, so I just wanted to add, with that 2015 parking study for West Main, I think the idea wasn't actually to build the garage over the park, which I agree would be crazy. It was so that like there's like the public parking lot by the park, and I think another private parking lot kind of if you swing around the old Albemarle Hotel. I think that was the site that they were talking about, but I think either way, it didn't make a lot of sense because of the shape of the site. And we've seen with the one on 7th and Market that, you know, you really want a big square site for a parking garage and not a weird U or L-shaped lot. So I definitely like the idea of programming the park better. And I guess I did have a question about the idea of kind of adding extra trays of parking for the Jeff School parking garage. It sounds like, at least in the immediate term, the big demand for that parking would be for kind of the local churches, especially First Baptist, which is pretty parking constrained. But I would think that most of the demand for parking that actually parks there now is, you know, stuff at the Jefferson School and is mostly focused on weekdays. And I wonder, like, what is the utilization of that garage on Sundays when First Baptist would need it? And is there an opportunity to potentially maybe sublease that space or those parking spaces to churches without necessarily having to add new garages? And then maybe in the longer run, you know, as you have this private redevelopment in place and opportunities for shared parking where they might not want to build the parking into their own structures, where they could finance the extra decks if they need the parking offsite. And that way we won't have to kind of spend city money to build it.
So when we first were having this conversation around what could potentially be done for that parking, what we were looking at, and again, this is part of this, is having conversations with folks that work at the Jefferson School Board Foundation. It's the need of that particular area, but not just thinking about the current need, but the future need. And so actually that particular garage is a little further away from First Baptist. It's closer to Ebenezer Church, and Ebenezer, you know, they're working, they get they have most of their parking on some land that they own right now, but they still struggle with parking as well. And it was also looking at the fact that if parking spaces went away from West Main Street, and how do we help to create this opportunity for people to not park in the neighborhood that don't belong in the neighborhood, but to rather, just walk a little bit further and park at the Jefferson School. That was part of what we were thinking about. And also at the time, the Quirk wasn't built, it was under construction, and knowing that, okay, so what does that mean? They're going to be using the Staples parking lot for their parking to support their hotel. And that tends to be overflow when you have, several events going on at the Jefferson School. So, parking is going to be, a big concern. And of course, if they got a party going on over at the Quirk, there's all sorts of opportunity where parking is going to become such a huge constraint in this particular area. So the idea was really to think about, let's make sure that we're planning ahead and thinking about the vitality of this particular area and all the vibrancy that having a new hotel in the area brings, and of course all of the programming that happens with the Heritage Center and other things that happen, and then of course then if you build something on City Yard, then that helps to support what is going to be built down in the future.
Gotcha. And so wait, just to clarify, so there's like 2 decks of parking now. So if the new ones would be 105, is it 210 spaces on that site right now?
Yes.
Okay. So that makes sense to me. So yeah, I mean, I guess again, something I'm thinking about is like, can we get that new development, or like you said, a lot of the demand maybe comes from the hotel or other offsite developers. So can we get them to kind of pony up the money so that we can save our city money for things like housing? And are there going to be opportunities for that, like a public-private partnership, something like that?
Well, our goal as we think about everything in this is that there should always be the thought of public-private partnership, and how do we collaborate so that that there's not just one entity solely responsible for trying to make this all work, but to think about how do we work collaboratively to make sure that these things can happen. And so once we consider who's in the space, I mean, you've got the code building that's going up. There's all kinds of opportunities for partnerships and who could potentially chip in to help, this become a reality in the future.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Any other questions from the commission? All right, then I'll ask council if they've got any questions for the applicant. Ms. Hill, Mr. Schnook, Mr. Payne, any questions for the applicant?
I had a couple of questions. The first, I think was touched on a little bit before, but maybe to sort of amplify on it a little bit. I'm interested in the extent to which Star Hill interacts with or would in this new with this new design scheme would interact with West Main. Part of what's attractive to me about the West Main streetscape is the plan's discussion of placemaking. And I'm not conscious right now of there being any place making going on in that area. I mean, the one place I can think of along the Star Hill portion of West Main is the commercial space around Mel's. I mean, it's a place that people go. It's a node in a sense, although an architect would sit there and probably say, no, that doesn't qualify as a node, but it's a place where people gather. Do you have a sense of other places along that 4 or 5 block area where Star Hill butts up against and intersects with West Main Street? Are there other places that you can see where we might be able to do some placemaking?
Absolutely. So one of the things that we speak to in there is the idea around pocket parks, to use some of those streets where it's, you're very close, the buildings are very close together, and it's kind of like a one-way street where you could create a pocket park there, or pocket parks in between the buildings. And again, that gives some opportunity for the residential community, or just people that are coming down Main Street, to have a place to kind of sit and pause. And even looking at one of the things that we talk about in our placemaking section is to take the art that exists in the history, local history, and bring that more out into the community, so that it's not something that just resides inside a building, but it comes out onto the street, where you can really start to have markers and things like that helps tell the story of the history of that particular area. So those are some of the ways we've talked. We demonstrated in there, not so much at the Main Street level, because Main Street is such a built out space. But looking at like some of the in-between spaces that kind of brings you up to Main Street, and that's where those pocket parks were suggested.
Well, I know one of the thoughts in the streetscape proposal was that there would be clusters of trees on a wider sidewalk where people might gather in the shade, and maybe there'd be some chairs there, maybe it would be right outside of a restaurant or something like that. The notion of using an art feature as being a highlight or a point around which people might gather is sort of intriguing to me. There are a lot of walls there that could be mural spaces, for example.
Absolutely. And, one of the things that we looked at, Miss Douglas from the Heritage Center, she was really, she just has such a great vision around like art, what can be done, especially along, the walls that face the front of the Heritage Center, right? That are just kind of these very, kind of bland commercial old walls, but there could be beautiful canvases that can be then turned into this wonderful works of art. Being able to use local artists, young and up and coming artists, but just a way to really be able to tell the history, tell the story, and to really showcase legacy throughout that area.
Okay. That's all I got for now.
Thanks, Mr. Snook.
I confess it's 180 pages. I have not yet mastered all of it.
I understand.
Anything from Councilor Payne or Councilor Hill?
I'm all set right now. Thank you.
Okay.
And no, I don't have any specific questions. Just the bigger questions, similar with all small area plans, I think, is just what steps are needed to turn it into reality. And in particular, I'm definitely interested in a clear sense of the dollar amount of investment that would be needed from the city, even with public-private partnerships, in order to turn some of this into reality. Particularly the City Yard site, is a difficult site, which will require some significant amount of remediation. So just a clear sense of what that dollar amount and investment from the city would need to be, and what city assets are needed. And again, some of the things touched on earlier, just what it takes to turn these kind of plans into reality.
So Mr. Payne, thank you for your comments. One of the things that we've done, just kind of woven it throughout the document itself, is just the sequencing of events of what things should happen first, second, third. We don't get deep into the pricing because, again, without having the true ability to understand what the original feasibility study said, it's very difficult. It was difficult for us to kind of speculate, but we could speculate on what could be built. But I think that, there's lots of opportunity, through grants, and those were some of the things that we explored in terms of ways that like remediation could be covered. Also in the environmental report that we received during this process that was done several years ago, that the initial study shows that there was, no significant reason why housing couldn't be developed on this particular land, that most of, if any, remediation that needed to happen would need to happen more towards the front side of the City Yard area, which in what we envisioned would have more of your commercial and your retail space in that particular area. But some remediation was done, to my understanding, when the garage for the Jefferson School was built. So there is probably some that still needs to be accomplished. And I think that, there's definitely a lot of state level or federal grants that can assist with that. And of course, our goal would certainly be to let's sit down and really, pencil out what are the next steps. We did, before you came to council, when we presented this back in 2019, for council then, we did speak to what are steps that council could take to help in the immediate that would allow for us to start to see this vision come to life. And some of those things that we've talked about here today, like the subdivision of the land, which allows for us to be able to go ahead and get started, to be able to start adding to the housing stock now. We also talked about, the street calming measures that could take place, the park that could take place. Those are things that really helps to show the community that, the efforts that they put into helping see this vision come to life are being honored. So those are some of the things that we feel like that are easy wins that we can start now as we think about the really big piece of it.
Very good. And with that, I think, Mr. Rice, we are ready to open it up for public comment. So are there folks, I see a couple of hands up, so I'll let you lead us, Mr. Rice.
Thank you, Chair Mitchell. Yes, if you'd like to address the commission on matters concerning the Star Hill Neighborhood Community Vision Plan, please click your raise hand icon. Or if you're joining us by phone, press *9 and you will be called upon in the order of hands raised. And you'll have 3 minutes for comment. And our first speaker is Jehu Martin. Jehu, you are on with the commission. You have 3 minutes.
And you'll need to unmute your mic, Jehu. You are still muted.
Mr. Martin, if you could unmute, if you could hear us.
I just unmuted, I think.
Yes.
You hear me now?
Got you. Yeah, welcome.
I'm sorry. Wasted your time, but it's only a quick question. I think the whole project sounds terrific. And just in terms of money and finances, how much has the city spent so far? How much, if there's not a breakdown now, sometime in the near future, breakdown of how much would be spent in the future before revenues come back and things like that? Because the city needs a lot of things, and this is one of them. And just, I'm curious, the city's already spent some money in this area. I'm just curious as to what else needs to be budgeted, let's say, over the next couple of years to make this happen. And I think if there are budget guidelines set up, then they won't be exceeded, which sometimes happens in any multi-phasic project like this.
We are not in work session mode, so we're not going to be able to get into a back and forth dialogue and get through everybody. But the question has been noted, and staff will attempt to get something out that attempts to answer that.
Okay, and those is an answer coming and something to look at, because that would keep the project on target, I think.
Yep.
And make sense. Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Yep. And Mr. Rice.
I'm sorry, I was muted myself. Mr. Krebs, you are on with the commission. You have 3 minutes.
Come, Peter. Yeah, Peter, you are muted. You'll need to unmute your mic, Peter.
Thank you. Thank you, Council.
Mr. Krebs, we are having.
Can you hear me?
Mr. Krebs, we are getting some audio distortion.
I only wish I could be.
Mr. Krebs, if you can hear me, if you could possibly dial in,
Okay,
that
folks,
might be a
can
way.
you hear me okay now?
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Sorry about
Yep.
that. Our internet spotty. So I'm so excited, and this is something that we've been looking forward to for a long time. I think a big congratulations to Yolanda and her team are in order. My boss is always reminding me that the stuff doesn't happen by accident. Great communities don't just make themselves. It's really important to get in front of the huge forces that drive development and change communities. We as a community get to decide what kind of place we want this to be. And this is what that work looks like. We're not revitalizing a community. That's such an important thing that this project acknowledges, but actually supporting a vital community that's there. This is Planning Commission, so we're thinking a lot about the good built environment elements. I love the connectivity, tying neighborhoods to surrounding resources, taming certain streets, getting rid of blank brick walls, transforming the rail corridor, penetrating the city yard, all kinds of good things. But I think it's also really important, and knowing how Yolanda and her team have been working, is that the physical piece is only half of what they're talking about, really. This is truly economic development in the way that I love to see it, which really starts with the community and the residents and their stories and their ideas and their visions for entrepreneurship. It's appropriately Black centered. I think that is so important. Like, if I were on Planning Commission or Council, job one would be trying to figure out how to keep the heart of Charlottesville how it has been. And so this is a real, you might say, down payment or a way to start locking in a vision that is one that is right for our city. It's about people, their histories, their dreams, and that's what really makes a city. So this is just so great. Hosea said that this is a vision, and this is just one piece of a vision, but it is that, and it's one that's worthy of the heart of Charlottesville. So congratulations, and council, give them the resources they need to make this vision come to pass. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
And next we have Kathy Galvin. Kathy, you are on with the commission. You have 3 minutes.
Kathy, welcome.
Okay, can everyone hear me?
Yep.
All righty. Well, thank you. Wonderful comments from the public. Thank you. And thank you, Yolanda, for a great presentation. Thanks for the opportunity, Chair Mitchell and planning commissioners. So I'm going to just reiterate and underscore the 5 reasons I gave 8 months ago as to why this vision is so important. That hasn't gone away. It's only gotten enhanced. So first, the plan celebrates Star Hill's historic residential heart and the Jefferson School. And it calls out the redevelopment potential for the city yard, the Vinegar Hill Shopping Center, and the mixed-use corner at Preston Avenue and 4th. All of this promotes a sense of place while guiding future investments in people and places. Second, the plan provides a vision for redevelopment, not by one developer, but by one community most impacted by development. It reclaims, reimagines, and reuses the land that we have squandered. Third, the plan addresses the injustice of Vinegar Hill in part by establishing, quote, a visible and tangible place for the incubation of new businesses linked to Charlottesville's Black business networks, and it calls for an anti-displacement tax fund program. It is a step towards repairing this scarred cultural and physical landscape. The current 2013 comp plan provides no guidance on how to protect Star Hill from market forces governed by a universally discredited zoning ordinance. The plan will serve as an interim safeguard for these vulnerable neighborhoods. 13 months ago, council passed a resolution. It's time to adopt this plan. So turning parking lots into public places enclosed by Black-owned businesses and homes and physically connected to the downtown as shown via the public plaza on page 75. And the Preston Harris Innovation Hub is described in text and diagram on page 54 is bold. replacing auto-centric, equity-blind, one-size-fits-all zoning with one that promotes walking, affordable housing, Black wealth creation, and respects Charlottesville's beloved Black neighborhoods is bold. Reconstructing the once walkable blocks lined with Black-owned homes and businesses of Vinegar Hill, cleared in 1965 to make way for super blocks dominated by corporate chains, is bold. So please, please endorse this plan. Send it to council with your full 100% endorsement. And then we will see, just like we saw with the Fifeville neighborhood, that you'll be edifying the community and putting back faith in the fact that government can actually get things done. But it starts with a plan. It starts with the vision. And then when you have that, you'll have the guidance to guide development, guide the kind of development, and guide public and private investment. So thank you very much for the opportunity. As always, thanks for your service. It's thankless.
Thank you, Kathy.
If anybody else would like to address commission during this time, please click your raise hand icon, or if you're joining us by phone, press *9. Chair Mitchell, I see no hands raised.
All right, the public hearing is now closed. All right, let's just begin some deliberation. The only thing I'll reiterate, and I think it's been reiterated by many of you, is that this is not a small area plan, it is a vision plan. It will iterate and iterate and iterate, and it will become a small area plan eventually, but this is a vision that we're making a recommendation on. So with that, I'm going to open it up to Mr. Lehendra.
Thank you, Chair. First off, I want to thank New Hill Development for coming back with a better plan than was presented in August. I am so pleased, and I know the community is, to have the core anchor institutions of the African American churches recognized and acknowledged and made part of this plan and folded into the strategies. This is a much stronger plan because of it. Thank you. I just wanted to say one thing about parking. We talk about how parking on Main Street is going to be stressed in the future if the Main Street development happens, or when it happens. But I can assure you it's happening now with the increased development along West Main Street. All of a sudden, when the Blue Moon Diner opened for Sunday brunch, parking really became unavailable for many of the parishioners at First Baptist Church. So that's only going to increase as more and more development happens along West Main Street and that area revitalizes. So we do have a serious parking issue that needs to be addressed. It's a smart plan. It's sensitive to the community. It's thoughtful. It has a lot of details, from opening up tunnels for pedestrians to thinking about parking, to thinking about pocket parks. I'm very, very supportive of it, but I'm also fearful. I'm fearful of the Star Hill historic residential neighborhood. I drive through there and I see those small bungalow houses, wonderful houses, resources, and I think about development happening and legs getting under this vision plan, and thinking about the development pressures on these landowners to sell these small houses and build bigger units. So anything we can do with our zoning ordinance changes to ensure that this neighborhood is protected, we have to be conscious and aware of that, and do our best to keep this neighborhood preserved. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Solhitz.
My standard concern, I want it now. Do we have a sense of timing on the small area plan and implementation? Let's get this stuff done.
That'd be a question for Alex and Yolanda.
Usually once the plan is adopted by the city council, we start referencing the plan, and then in terms of implementation, we let other city departments that have a vested interest, know that the plan is adopted, so that they can review the plans and then work some of the practical implementation projects, into their work schedule in terms of funding and scheduling. But the big, one of the big items there, the city yard, which is about 10 acres, the new city manager, we have to bring that to his attention if he's not already in the loop, so that once he hires an assistant city manager for operations, they can re-engage again one more time in the discussion of everything that has to do with the relocation of that particular operations to a new site, and among other things, But the main thing right now is adoption of the plan. Then we take it to the next steps, And also, as you folks may know, there is a hold on the long-range planner, So when the economy improves, and then there is a lift on the freeze, then we move forward with hiring that particular position. And that person, among other things, will also be responsible for coordinating implementation, of the comprehensive plan, the small area plan or vision plan, and other long-range activities. So the next first step in the implementation is approval of the plan. And then we take it subsequent after council action from there.
Right. So the good news is Chip is online and watching and engaged and ready to go. So hopefully he's taking this all in. Is that it? Lyle, are you done? Okay. Ms. Dow.
I don't have any further questions. I just wanted to make a quick comment that I do like the work that I see that we put into this plan, and I look forward to the fruition of the plan.
And Reverend Heaton.
Well, of course, I was delighted to see some attention paid to Sunday morning parking. It is a constant present conversation among downtown churches. I think church culture and commerce, does not benefit from blue laws and things anymore as it once did, and so it's not all about infrastructure, but it is I was delighted to see that addressed, and I think a lot of the congregations who've tried to make a commitment to staying downtown would love to see this type thing repeated, or at least the consideration of it and it being spoken about. I also want to applaud the placemaking process and that whole idea, which is, we've borrowed that from other communities that have had success in looking at development with nodes and placemaking. So, and finally, the connectivity issue and the car-centric transportation. There is no easy answer to that. I think it'd be foolish to pretend that cars are going to go away, but at the same time, we will encourage a less car-centered community if we put a premium on pedestrian and other transit needs. So I think this is a great start, and I too would love to see it move quickly to the small area plan process.
Mr. Stolzenberg.
Thanks. Yeah, I don't have a lot to say. I'd like to echo other commissioners and Ms. Galvin in commending you guys on all the work you've done. I think like this is a really critical part of our city, and it's scarred from the mistakes that planners of the past have made, often deliberately and maliciously. And I'm glad to see that we're starting the process of undoing those wrongs. I have some minor things. I'll probably follow up by email. There are things like typos and whatever. I would like you guys to take a look at that graphic on page 19, where I think what you find is that in the city, things like Class B apartments can reach much deeper levels of affordability than it says there. Like I don't think it's 2,200 and change per month for a Class B apartment in the city yet, and even for new ones. And you know, I walked every block of Star Hill as part of reviewing this plan, and I think what I saw was that the process of gentrification and redevelopment into upscale, you know, large single-family homes is well underway. You know, whether through renovation or tear down or just changing hands. And so I think that really, you know, provides an impetus to give some urgency to, you know, the affordable housing efforts outlined in the plan. And I really like, again, the easy win of new homes on Brown Street. And I think what we also see is that there's already, you know, a big mix of housing forms in the neighborhood, and that's reflected in the plan. And so, you know, as change happens, I'd like to see us kind of embrace those housing forms that are most affordable naturally. So, thanks.
And Ms. Russell.
Great segue into my echoing concern about protecting those naturally occurring modest and older historic houses, which, you know, of course, we'll be hoping to look at as we move forward in the comprehensive, in the zoning rewrite. Maybe I sort of pose this as a kind of thought exercise, which is for these small area plans that are small area and vision plans. I'm thinking of Cherry Avenue and now the Star Hill. How do we take these into account as we move forward in the comprehensive planning process and keep them, you know, what informs what? Are we thinking about these very recent and deliberate plans as we address items within the comp plan update? And if we are doing so, is that equitable to other communities that have not had the opportunity to have recent small area plans or vision plans? And how is their input, you know, up to date and recent? I think Alex said that there's we're sort of paused on long-term planning, and so it doesn't sound like there's any future vision plans or small area plans. So my question is more of like a process one for us to think about as we move forward. But another thought is something we talked about in our pre-meeting about the, you know, to ensure affordability of those new units on proposed on Brown Street. I think it would be, it sounded to me like the city would either need to own those lots and through a land bank or land acquisition program, or heavily incentivize affordability via a subsidy, or else you'll probably see new empty lots available, you know, snatched up pretty quick and not become affordable. So we want to try to think of that as we move forward in the zoning. But just want to commend applaud the New Hill and the Star Hill community for its visionary thinking, and appreciate it.
So Alex, do you have, or Jenny, I think Jenny's on as well. Do you have any feedback relating to Liz's question regarding the process and incorporating this into the new plan?
Yeah. Once Planning Commission recommends and City Council approves, it becomes part of the comprehensive plan, and the staff has discussed, and we continue to do so with the consultant, handling the comprehensive plan update, that we have several small area plans, 29, Cherry Avenue, Star Hill, 5th Street Corridor Study, Riverna, River Corridor, and a few other plans that they need to take into consideration in updating the comprehensive plan and in crafting, the zoning rewrite. So they will take the action that Planning Commission takes tonight, and subsequently by the City Council, our consultant will take those into consideration in updating the comprehensive plan. So it's gonna be aligned, with the comprehensive plan in a nutshell.
Good. Bill, any other thoughts?
I wouldn't say I have any groundbreaking thoughts versus what's already been said. I think it's all good feedback on the plan, and it's a very exciting, idea for this part of the city. The idea that you take something like the city yard, which is kind of I don't want to call it a black hole, but something that like people don't really focus on, and it's right in the middle of the city, and just kind of turning it on its head so that it really becomes this linchpin in the middle of the city to create all these connections and provide all this housing and jobs and office space, mixed use, whatever. It's really something. So looking forward to seeing how this progresses, and just great work.
So Mr. Alejandro, may I invite you to make a motion? And we can have any further discussion that we might need to have afterwards.
I would be glad to, but you're going to have to bear with me until I find it in my packet here.
I may have a motion.
Oh, please, Lyle. Can I second?
I'd like to suggest that we approve the resolution in the packet, starting with a resolution of the Charlottesville Planning Commission recommending adoption of the Star Hill Vision Plan. Whereas, is that adequate?
Yeah, I think it's good.
Enthusiastically second.
All right, is there any further discussion? Ms. Creasy, would you poll the board?
Sure. Mr. Alejandro.
Aye.
Mr. Soliates.
Aye.
Ms. Dow.
Aye.
Mr. Heaton.
Aye.
Mr. Stolensberg.
Aye.
Ms. Russell.
Aye.
And Mr. Mitchell.
Aye. Right, unanimous. Congratulations. Now on to the next step. And thank you, Brad. That was a great presentation. You guys did an incredible job. So thank you for your work, and thank you for making this easy for us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us, and from our team, we appreciate you inviting us to be able to participate tonight. You all get out and enjoy some of the sunshine this week.
Hey, you too. Do we want to take a 5-minute break, or do we want to keep going? I see yes to 5-minute break. All right, 5-minute break, and so we'll be in recess for 5 minutes, and then we've got a special use permit. 5 minutes, Mr. Rice. Ready. I think we are ready to re-engage. Do we still have council? Yes, we do. Michael, Heather, oh yeah, we're good. All right. And is Miss Creasy back? Yes, she is. Okay, well, that's great. Are you guys ready? Everybody ready? Cool, okay. All right, the next application, next thing on our docket is an amendment to a special use permit that we approved a little while back. It is SP 21-00001. And this is for the Air Street Apartments development. The address is 1221, 1223, 1225 Harris Street. The applicant is requesting an amendment to, again, a previously approved SUP. In the previously approved SUP, we allowed for a mixed development. So they had residential units and they had commercial space on the ground floor. We also granted them the right to build 105 units on the property. So the so it's 43 dwelling units per acre. So that's what was previously approved. The only thing they're asking is to add 15 more units. So that would take them to 120 units on the site that we're talking about. So that's that'll take them to, again, 120 units and 50 dwelling units per acre. So adding 15 units. And I believe Mr. Haluska is managing this application.
That is correct. Good evening, commissioners and councilors. As Chairman Mitchell stated, this is a special use permit, a request for a special use permit or an amendment of an existing special use permit. The process for amending a special use permit is the same as granting a special use permit. So no real difference in the process that we are going through on this property. The property is 1221, 1223, and 1225 Harris Street. That site currently contains a commercial building that is fronting on Harris Street and a residence on Harris Street, and also contains the building that is known as the Habitat Store. The Habitat Store is not intended to be impacted by the project that was previously approved. The building will sit on the two properties in the front, but for the purposes of calculating density, they are allowed to incorporate it into the site and use that acreage in terms of calculating density. As Chairman Mitchell stated, this application was previously, this special use permit was granted for this property previously that allowed up to 43 dwelling units per acre. The applicant is request in front of you this evening is to increase the density permitted on the site from 43 units per acre or to 50 units per acre, which would result in a net maximum gain of 15 units on the site. It's currently approved for 105, maximum 105 units. The request before you is to increase it to 120 units total maximum. This application, when it was previously reviewed, some of the questions that have been brought up by the public were brought up then. One of them being traffic, as we noted in our staff report. The intersection of McIntyre and Harris Street is of concern to our traffic engineer now. It would need to be monitored as a part of this project. It is going to be monitored as part of development in general in that area, particularly as previously constructed space leases up. So that intersection also with Allied Street there, it's kind of a weird intersection because of the topography and the 4 points coming together in kind of odd configuration. So there's already the traffic engineers already noted that this site, obviously, as its impact would have to be calculated along this. There's also, I know some concern came up about other modes of transportation in this area, particularly pedestrian access to the Shanks Branch Greenway and McIntyre Park by nature of that. The city is already underway with they're not under construction, but they're under planning, in the planning stages of constructing a sidewalk adjacent to this property that would connect with the sidewalk going down in Allied and kind of connect it to the rest of Harris Street. So that is coming soon. and will probably most likely be constructed prior to this building because it's further along in the process. That project has been coordinated with the applicant for this project. In analyzing the increase in density, a lot of the same metrics that we used for the original special use permit still apply here. There is considerable park land within walking distance of this site, both McIntyre Park and Shanks Greenway. It is walkable to the downtown area and also to the increasing amount of commercial space and commercial uses in the along the Allied Street property, right down the hill from this. They're all under common ownership. So there have been 2 residential buildings built at the bottom of the hill along that cul-de-sac of Allied, and also the rehab of the old furniture warehouse that is now being used as commercial space. In fact, they just announced a tenant for a restaurant use in the restaurant space that they had constructed in there. Some other concerns that were raised, one is tree canopy. And as I noted in the pre-meeting, the tree canopy regulations are set by our zoning ordinance. They do need to comply and show compliance with those regulations as a part of the site plan process. So that will be covered during that process. Also, they will, their traffic impact, at least the trip generation, will be a part of that site plan. And there could be potential for, if a traffic study is warranted by the traffic count, it would be done at that stage of the development. And I know the applicant has been told to be prepared to discuss the affordable housing that was previously approved on this site, the conditions that were offered by the applicant and approved by council. So they can certainly discuss that in some detail. The other item that's out there that it isn't really referenced in the staff report because staff felt it wasn't really germane to the topic tonight, but I do know Chairman Mitchell mentioned it, is the Board of Zoning Appeals, that a variance was requested and granted by the Board of Zoning Appeals for this site. And that really pertained to how height would be measured on the site. So the applicant, the way our code reads, there's the frontage along Allied Street counted as part of measuring height, and so they really didn't get the benefit of the topo in this situation because of that Allied frontage on Allied, which sits far below Harris. So I believe the applicant's request was related to the uniqueness of the site, that the way, and kind of offered a way to measure height that would allow them to implement the building that they did propose to the Planning Commission and the City Council, because in reviewing it further, city staff had determined that our definition of height and the way we measure height would not have permitted the building that they proposed, even though it's below, even though it complied with all of the conditions in the SUP. So the condition of, I think 1B is the highest elevation point of 520. The issue here was the question of, the building can only be a certain number of numerical feet tall. And based on our height definition, when you factored in Allied Street, their height on Harris exceeded that number. So that's where the BZA came in. That was really a definition question, and the variance goes with the property, so it's granted. And because it related to the size and shape of the building, it's really not under review this evening. What's under review this evening is what can they do within the confines of the building as it was presented in the special use permit and as it was, as the variance was granted by the BZA to build. So with that, staff has no real reservations about the request. It mirrors what was previously approved by City Council, including all the conditions previously granted. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have about this. The only correction I will make regarding it is
yes, for your birthday. Have a fun.
Good, Brian, please.
Yeah. is a reference to a staff report or not a staff report, a site plan. The supporting drawings dated December 11th. The applicant did update those, and there might just be some miscommunication with staff, but we'll update, make sure all the dates and the attachments are correct and all the conditions are correct. I think that's it, that the site plan exhibit in condition 1, we'll probably need to update that date. But we'll make sure all of that is that we're referencing the proper plans that have been submitted. But all the attachments are the ones that have been most recently provided by the applicant.
All right, I'm still a little, I just texted you about this as well. I'm a little bit confused about the recommendation on page 12, and that's 1B again. Is that even relevant anymore? I mean, should that be in this? Because this limits the height to a limit that I think is below what the BZA approved.
That's not my take on it. My take is this was, once again, condition 1, like we said in the pre-meeting, was really intended to memorialize the drawings that we received back in December 2019 and what the Planning Commission and City Council saw in the consideration of the special use permit. I don't think anything, so the applicant's intent was always not to exceed that level. The problem that they ran into was when they then spoke to zoning about the drawing that they had and said, what's the height? How do you measure height on this site? Because it's such a odd site and the way it's kind of been put together. Our determination was that we were, the way the code was written, we were not, we couldn't approve it as it was drawn up with the height that they were asking for, which was that 6-story block on Harris.
And so how many feet above sea level does that 6-story block take them? Are they still at 520 or below?
The roof was at 520, yes.
Based on what we approved, what the BZA approved.
Yeah, the BZA's approval enabled that building to happen. So 520 is based on the SUP drawings. It wasn't, the issue that came up after the fact was zoning was not, felt that the zoning ordinance didn't allow them to build what they had proposed.
Right, so this is a non-issue.
I think so, yes.
Yeah, cool. All right, let's begin with UVA. Mr. Poller, any questions?
No questions.
Ms. Russell.
I don't think I have questions for staff. I have questions. Is the developer going to give a presentation?
Yep. Well, we're going to open up to them at least. Yeah. Okay. Rory, any questions for Brian?
No, I think I'll save it for the applicant. Thanks.
Okay. Rep Meaton.
No questions for staff.
Ms. Dowell.
I don't have any questions for staff. The only question I have in general about this project is, to be transparent, is what I asked during the pre-meeting of the additional 15 units.
Okay. And Mrs. Soliates, any questions for staff?
Excellent, very clear, thank you.
And Mr. Lindra.
No questions.
Right, the applicant is up. And Chris, are you representing the applicant? Because if you are, you're muted.
All right, can everybody hear me okay? There you go. And is it, Brian, are they pulling up the presentation? I did have a short presentation put together.
I know Joe,
Or am I?
Joe did have one ready for you. Yeah, here you go.
Okay, great. So good evening, commissioners, counselors, Chris Virgilio from Woodard Properties. I'll keep this fairly brief. As Brian noted, the project, or as we've been discussing, the project does have an approved SUP for 6 stories and 105 dwelling units. We are asking for the 15 extra units, and on the next slide, included just a site plan and some project totals. The project totals now 120 residential units, 170 parking spaces, and 5,000 square feet of commercial. And I included the vicinity map here just to remind us that that this building will be a part of McIntyre Plaza, and these residents will be steps away from supporting all the 100 small businesses and local businesses down at McIntyre Plaza. So we see that as a huge positive to this project and the increased residential density that we're asking for. So on the next slide, I highlighted some floor plans here just to show you where the project is now. The red is commercial use. As you can see in the top left, we have still have commercial use on the Allied Street level frontage, and also commercial space in your bottom left ground level along the private access drive that would face the Habitat store on the back side of the building. And then the blue is parking and the green is residential. And I do want to remind everybody that the yellow arrows indicate entrances to the parking garage. We've designed this building with no internal ramping, so we have on-grade entrances to each level of parking below the structured parking that's below the building. This allows us to most efficiently use the space inside of the building for all uses, parking, residential, and commercial. So the next slide shows level 450 in the top right is the level that's about on grade with Harris Street. You can see we kept commercial uses on the Harris Street frontage, and then above that we have the 5 stories of residential, and the bottom right is the top story of the building. We've one change I wanted to bring to your attention is we did slide that amenity space to the front of the building closer to Harris Street, so we could include a few more residential units on that floor, which I will point out, which I highlighted on the next slide in the massing plan. So if we take a look at, I guess you can see it best in the bottom left. You can see that rectangular portion at the top level of the building is what I was just describing as the added residential dwelling unit space on the top floor. And then we also added the net of about 10 feet in height off of Allied Street from the massing drawings that you saw on the previous application. So the next slide, you can see these changes again in the elevations on the next slide here. So, and that is it. If we go to the last slide here, the project overall hasn't changed much. We still think it's a great project for Charlottesville. And I just want to remind everybody, these aren't luxury apartments. They're going to be economically priced units for Charlottesville workers. It's providing housing that's close to the urban core, and we did agree with City Council, and we are committed to providing the 5 affordable dwelling units in the building. That's it. Any questions?
All right, Bill, got any questions? Do we lose Bill?
No, I'm here. Yeah, no questions. Thanks, though.
And Liz?
I will let Rory ask his question about the affordability, because we sort of had a similar question about better defining that. Your presentation clarified a question I had, which was sort of in the what way is the building facing? And, forgive me because I wasn't on Planning Commission when this was first reviewed. So some of my questions are not even really germane. But I am I'm sort of, I'm disappointed in that this building will essentially have its back to Harris, and it seems like it will just be parking at that street level. It's hard for me to understand exactly how the circulation is moving around with parking and commercial at that habitat nexus. Seems like it might be kind of problematic, people trying to get to the commercial, but the parking trying to get into the parking deck there, parking facility. But I mean, there's clearly challenges with the grade. But my question really was about sort of like what is the building fronting, and how its relationship to the streets around it is.
Okay. So yeah, I can speak to that just a little bit. We did try to keep both. We are considering Allied and Harris Street as two the primary frontages, both primary frontages. So we consider the building as having two fronts, one on Allied, one on Harris. So we try to keep that commercial space along the frontage to engage with the sidewalk.
I'm sorry, is the frontage on the Harris Street not facing the habitat? That was the way I was interpreting that.
Correct. What I'm calling the backside of the building would face the Habitat store. And that's between the new proposed building and the Habitat store is the private access drive that runs parallel to Harris Street.
Yes.
And our new building sits in between them.
Okay, so is there actually a commercial facing Harris then?
Yes, there is.
That red. Okay, then I misunderstood your plan. So, okay, so there's commercial facing Harris, there's commercial facing Allied, and then there's private entrances to the parking.
Correct.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you for clarifying. That's all.
And Rory.
Sorry, I just want to follow up on that. There's commercial facing Harris Street? That's sort of not what I see in your levels here. Or is it residential facing Harris Street?
There's commercial at the sidewalk level on Harris Street, and then above that would be residential.
Gotcha. So there's commercial both along Allied and 40 feet up along Harris?
Correct. At the street level on both primary streets, Allied and Harris, correct.
Okay. Okay, so I think my most important question is about the affordable housing. So there's two separate affordable housing conditions here. I think we discussed this last time, but the agenda and the minutes are not on the website, so I couldn't find them. So we have 5 units that are offered to be affordable, and what level, either rent or percent of AMI, will they be affordable at? Or will they be in compliance with our standard operating procedures for affordable dwelling units?
Sure. So we ran the calculation, and I didn't discuss this with Planning Commission last go around, but we did discuss it with City Council, and we ran the calculations, consulted with John Sales, who was the housing coordinator at the time, and the calculations come out to actually the building being just below the development being just below 1 FAR. It was teetering on 1 FAR, so we were teetering on not triggering the affordable dwelling ordinance and just being just slightly above it. So really, we may have not been required to provide any units, or possibly like a fraction of a unit, which I would have assumed got rounded up to one, would have been rounded up to 1 unit. So we decided as a company we wanted to do something more, and that's how we came up with the five units, and we were offering those at 80% AMI for 10 years. And in addition to that, we did agree to hold, I think for the first 2 months, hold a certain amount of the units for voucher holders at initial lease up.
Right. So that's the second half of my question. So 5 units for voucher holders, but of course, to apply a voucher, there are rent limits on that, right? They're called the payment standards. And so for a housing authority, that's 90 to 110% of fair market rents. And in Charlottesville, it's 110% fair market rents. But that amount is lower than 80% AMI. So are those 5 units separately reserved for the housing vouchers going to be priced at a level where you can apply a housing voucher? And I can give you those numbers if you'd like. So 80% of AMI for a 1-bedroom is going to be $1,500, including utilities. And then 110% of FMR for a 1-bedroom is going to be $1,185 or $1,393 for a 2-bedroom.
So, I think it would be close.
Sorry, is anyone else not hearing him?
Muted yourself.
Okay.
Chris, you muted yourself.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, with the echoes back from all the. Nope.
Oh, back to muted.
We'll just have to do it.
I think it will be close with those figures. We were looking at, in a market rate of somewhere in the range of 1,200 to 1,500. So, it's hard to say until we actually get the building built and, see what the actual rents will be at that time.
And you're talking about kind of the market with the normal units in the development, right?
Correct.
So when you guys are saying that you're going to reserve 5 units for housing choice voucher holders, you're not making any commitment that the rents will allow application of that voucher for those 5 units?
Yeah, we didn't. That's a good question. I guess not. No. We're committed to like I said, the 5 affordable units. And, when we had talked about this with John Sales, he had said this would be something nice to offer kind of if it worked out, because at the time there were 50 to 60 people on the waiting list for people with vouchers trying to find apartments. So that was just kind of something else we threw on there that would be, if it worked out, that was would help.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, of course, by new state law that's passed since we last approved your project, you're not allowed to discriminate against housing choice voucher holders anyway. Of course, you don't have to reserve and hold them for them, but I thought we had discussed it last time, and we had come to the conclusion that 50% or five units would be at 80% AMI, and the others would be at fair market rent in order to make that work. Otherwise, I'm a little bit confused about what that promise is worth.
Yeah, I guess I am too. Now you're asking it to me, because I know as a company, we own and manage our own housing here and in Charlottesville, and we accept vouchers at all our properties. So, and I guess we had put that in there just on advice from John Sales. So maybe it is meaningless if all of our properties accept vouchers already, and this one wouldn't be any different. So that's a good point.
Okay. And I have one more question, but I can give to the other commissioners since I'm out of time.
Good.
Go ahead. Okay. So in your application, you write that there are no existing residents on the property that will be displaced as a result of the special use permit because the redevelopment is permitted as a matter of right. So, you know, I understand there's a duplex on the property right now, which of course you can always tear down your duplex and leave it as empty, barren land. But I don't think that is the intent of that question in the application. And I see on Zillow that as of September, you had rented out one of the units, the 1-bedroom in that duplex, for $925 a month. Which is affordable at a little bit under 50% AMI. And the B unit, there's a 2-bedroom, hadn't been rented out since 2015 or so, but back then was $800 a month, or at least that I can find online. So to be clear, there are people living on site now, right?
That's correct. One of those apartments is occupied. That's correct.
Okay, yeah, I mean, like, I think we're making a trade-off here between one person potential or one household potentially being displaced and 120 new ones being built. And I personally think that that probably makes sense as a trade-off. But I really just don't appreciate the disingenuous response in that application to that question. You know, clearly there are residents on site, and so that should be the answer to that question. So, yeah.
All right, on to Reverend Lee.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up too about the 5 affordable units and the addition of what's the additional unit requests? Are those all on the upper stories, the inside renovations that you're proposing?
The 5 affordable units will be in the building. They'll be mixed throughout all floors of the building.
Okay. So that's throughout the building will be the affordable, and the changes that you're making are not on these affordable units though.
So the change is really adding a few more units to the building, but we wouldn't change. Yeah, there's no change to the affordable units, correct?
All right, thank you.
Ms. Dow.
So Roy, thank you for that question. That was one of the questions I had too about the affordability of the units, and then also about someone being displaced, because we did see in the report that there was a duplex on the property. And then it was also a little confusing, but I think we've kind of cleared it up. But I'm gonna ask the question again, just in case somebody at home may be having the same question. So in the report, it said that you were doing affordable units, and then also you were offering the housing vouchers. And so just for clarity, the housing vouchers that you're offering are for the 5 affordable units. That's not additional units that the voucher can go to, or is it?
No, it was intended to be 2 separate things.
Okay.
But
and in the report, it seemed like 2 separate things, so I wasn't sure. So just so we're clear, the project is offering 5 affordable units at 80% AMI. In addition to, you will be able to accept housing choice vouchers for a unit outside of those 5 affordable.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
So if I may add there, actually, I think at 80% AMI, the rent is just still too high to apply housing choice vouchers to. So it wouldn't be possible to use the vouchers on those units.
Well, I guess my question to the commission is, and I'm sorry if I'm out of line or jumping ahead of anyone, if that is part of the stipulations of the project and they're not going to be able to uphold them, how do we move forward with that?
I'm going to have to defer to Mr. Hunduska, Ms. Robertson, Ms. Cleese.
Yeah, I mean, one of the ways that we look at those conditions is obviously from a staff perspective is the enforceability of them during the zoning review and during the continued operation of the building. As the way that condition is written, and I believe I can directly quote it. I've got it up on the other screen here. During the first 2 months for which the building leases dwelling units, the landowner shall reserve 5 units for lease by housing choice voucher holders. So, 5 units are available for 2 months. We obviously have to work with the applicant in their agreement with the city that precedes a building permit during the site plan process to kind of flesh out how that complies with our SOP and how that would be monitored and ultimately get the monitoring from them. But it kind of harkens back to some of the older commitments we had with affordable housing at the time when, they were offered and available for, if PHA could provide, a lot of times they would mention PHA, PHA unbeknownst to PHA would get put into a condition. And then, somebody would say, I've got a house ready. PHA provided me a buyer within 3 months and PHA wouldn't have any buyers. And then that house would become market rate. So the way that condition is written, at the end of the 2 months, if those units have not been taken by voucher holders, presumably they would then be offered to the general public.
So the only other thing I would add as a lawyerly comment is there's a rule of interpretation that says you don't interpret words in a way that assumes that people intend an impossibility. So one way to read these words is to interpret them as saying if the 5 units or if units have to be reserved for people who have housing choice vouchers, the rents have to be at rents that would allow people to use those vouchers. And so I would tend to say that if I were advising the zoning administrator of 3 years from now from what these words mean, I would say that it means that the rents for those first 2 months for those units have to be at a level that would allow people to use their vouchers. So if that is not what is intended by the applicant's offer, then we have to take a new look at whether the applicant is still offering that as a prospect, and if not, how the lack of that might fit into your overall analysis of the request for additional units.
If I could jump in again, maybe. So thank staff for that. And I really thought that we had gone over this last time, and that was roughly the conclusion that we ended up at, which I guess is maybe a lesson in getting everything in writing, or at least having the minutes online. But maybe I should have watched the video. But I feel like part of the confusion here is just that what actual rents are for the kind of abstract concepts of percent AMI that we talk about, because if you're talking about your 1 bedrooms at 1,200 and your 2 or 3 bedrooms at 1,500, it kind of sounds like the market rate rents that you expect to have are lower than these like 80% AMI affordable unit rents that you're offering. And that perhaps the market rate rents would be accessible to vouchers based on what you're planning. So I sent you a spreadsheet in the chat of what rents, including utilities, are for different affordability thresholds, if that helps answer the questions.
So let's keep going down the line. I think we're about to go to Mrs. Sully Yates.
I have questions about time and trees. Time. You suggested it sounds like 10 years was the stipulation with the 5 units proffered previously. I don't know if proffered is the right term. The 5 units discussed previously. We've had housing consultants say that 99 years is possible. I'm interested in your thoughts on that. Are actually 99 years possible? Is that pie in the sky? I don't know. I don't know the real truth here, so I'd like your thoughts on this, if possible. Are you okay?
So Chris, that was to you, question to you.
Sorry, could you repeat the question again? I was having computer issues here.
Understood. So 10 years was discussed previously. We're currently working on a housing strategy where it was recommended that 99 years become standard as in ordinance. It is not ordinance yet. I'm interested in your thoughts on that.
For this project, or is it?
Sure, for this project.
I mean, we have, these projects have to meet certain financial benchmarks in order to be financed, and that type of subsidy, if it's required to be provided by the developer, these projects just wouldn't happen because the developers couldn't afford them.
Thank you for that terrible news. Trees. We got a lot of public comment about trees, canopy. Can you talk about that?
Yes, so I think there is opportunity on Harris Street to provide some trees. And also we're trying to figure out a way to provide some trees off of the frontage on Allied Street as well. So I know the building footprint takes up most of the site, but we are working on some ways to get trees back around the building.
Thank you.
And Mr. Littra.
No questions.
All right. Any questions for council, from council, before we open it up to the public?
I'm all set.
I don't have any.
Not at this time.
Great.
And sorry, I do have one more question if I could jump in. Just a general, what motivated this change with these extra 15 units or 10 feet of height on the side, and why now rather than back when we originally discussed this, or what was the change?
Sure. Yeah, I think it was mainly for two reasons. When we presented at Planning Commission last year, there were one or two commissioners I think had commented or even requested and asked if we could get more units in the building in the same footprint, same mass, same shell. So we went back and scratched our heads on that and came up with a way to do that. Also, it's helping us deal with the current financial construction materials, and wood has gone up 4 or 5 times what it was when we started looking at this project a year ago. So we're trying to balance the construction costs as well.
And are you able to construct this out of wood given the amount of stories in it?
Yes, we believe we can. We haven't had an official meeting with the building code officers, but we believe that we can build it out of wood on a podium.
Thanks.
Sure.
Mr. Rice, would you open us up to public comment?
Thank you, Chair Mitchell. If you'd like to address the commission on matters concerning the Harris Street Special Use Permit Amendment, please click your raise hand icon, or if you're joining us by phone, press *9, and you'll be called upon in the order of hands raised. You'll have 3 minutes for comment. And we have Linda Goldstein. Linda, you are on with the commission. You have 3 minutes.
Welcome.
I live on Birdwood Road, which is right above McIntyre Plaza. So I'm quite close to this. And I was really pleased to hear earlier in the meeting all the talk about sidewalks and trees and things, which will make the complex more attractive. And I think that's good. I would like to suggest another way to make things more attractive to the neighborhood, and that would be a small grocery store on the ground floor. It would be a real asset to the community. I envision a place where one can buy the basics for preparing a meal without having to get into a car to drive to a store, which would help with the traffic flow. Things like yogurt, vegetables, meat, rice, fruit, and other items of that sort would be very handy to have nearby. I would frequent such a place. I know other people who would as well. And with multiple apartment complexes in the plaza now, and homes on McIntyre and in my neighborhood around Birdwood, a well-run market of this sort, I think, could do well. And if the items were not priced too high. So I'm thinking of something along the lines of Market Street Market. I'm not thinking of a 7-Eleven kind of store. And I would just encourage the developer to think about that. Thank you.
Thanks.
If anybody else would like to comment on this public hearing, please click the raise hand icon. Next up, we have Victoria Metcalf. Victoria, you're on with commission. You have 3 minutes.
I'd like some clarification of how you plan to respond to the traffic issue. I just heard vague responses of, well, there will be a traffic study if it's necessary. What does that mean? What does that lead to? What can be done? Do you need to have that done before you approve this project?
And I'll remind us that we are not in a work session, so we won't be able to go into a back and forth during a regular public hearing. But I will give Mr. Lusk an opportunity to provide another broad outline before we begin our deliberations.
Thank you.
Mr. Rice, anybody else?
Chair Mitchell, I see no other hands raised.
Right, then I will end the public comment section. And Mr. Holuska, could you just give us a real quick reminder of what the traffic engineers are going to be doing and what happens in the site planning process and all that good stuff?
Yeah, sure, Chairman Mitchell. So the traffic is a part of the site plan process, which our nomenclature here and glossary terms are possibly creating an issue. Right now, we're reviewing a special use permit, and a special use permit sets kind of the boundaries in terms of the maximum densities and maximum heights that a developer can take advantage of when they develop a property. If this were to be approved, the developer would then move forward with a plan of development, which will get into the engineering of the site. And a part of the engineering is traffic management, it's access, making sure there's safe access to the site, and also looking at the total number of volume of trips that are going to be exiting and entering into the site at what times. A lot of that depends on the use of the building and the square footage of the building. So the unit count that's in it, but also where those trips are coming in and out. As the applicant has stated, a lot of, most of the car trips are going to be entering and exiting, or intended to enter and exit off of Allied in that road next to the Habitat store, between this site and the Habitat store. So there's the question of, would those cars use Allied to get out? Would those cars then go up the hill and use an exit onto Harris? All of these things are things that are analyzed as a part of a site plan review that will go on in the future. Ultimately, if there's an unsafe condition in the opinion of the traffic engineer, corrections need to be made to the plan to make sure that we have a safe condition. That relates more to the geometry of the site, in terms of like turning movements and things like that, and sight lines. The other element of this is there is a broader concern with all of the projects in this area and the impact on the intersection down at the bottom of the hill. That is something that is on the traffic engineer's radar. It's already on the radar. This building merely kind of makes the fire a little hotter under that intersection. But there's already potential changes that are in the mind of the traffic engineer. As this project moves forward, it may create a situation where they've got to hasten some improvements to that. Particularly, I think the one that I've often heard about is the right-hand turning movement from Harris onto McIntyre, and the fact that that's kind of tied up. The width of the road there allows for all of the turning movements to kind of sometimes tie each other up and back the cars up Harris. So they will certainly be monitoring that. They're monitoring that now. They will continue to monitor that. My guess is this building's not going to go over the threshold potentially for a traffic study, but if it does, there would be a traffic study. It would cover very much of what I've already said in terms of, how much is it going to contribute and what are the conditions at that intersection? Do they get to the point where we've got to mitigate those with some sort of improvements at that intersection, whether it's better signaling or potentially restriping or something that allows the movement of cars in there not to impede access up Harris. So hopefully that answers the question. It's to be determined what actually gets done, but it is something that comes up in the development review process prior to a site plan being approved.
And thank you very much. All right, we are at the point of deliberation. So I'll just open it up to anyone who has some thoughts.
Sorry, I got one more question. Thanks to Commissioner Russell for sending me or helping me find the last time minutes. It looks like last time we actually only had 130 parking spaces in this proposal, and now we have 170, I believe. So what drives that pretty large 40 space increase in parking for these new 15 units?
So we have 15 extra units. We heard concerns over from neighbors and businesses, about street parking, people from the building parking on the street or in McIntyre Plaza. And, we were trying to balance both, getting more units in the building and also trying to maximize the parking in the building as well. And I think we've done that. We only have 120 units, but some of those apartments will have 2 cars, and they're probably 10 to 15 of those parking spaces will be for the commercial use as well. So I think we're not even. It seems like a lot of parking, but I don't think it's excessive by any means.
It's apparently almost exactly the same phrase you used last time. But I'd say I personally would like to see even more units and less parking. And I'd like to echo the point you made last time that because you have both residential and commercial in the same building, to some extent that they can share the amount of parking available because they operate at different tempos. So I know we probably can't add extra units beyond what you've requested this time because the hearing has already been advertised. But personally, I think anytime you can add more housing and less housing for cars, that is something to be desired.
Sure. Yeah, and I think we just to add to that point, we tried to, there are a lot of areas in the building that aren't livable, that are only good for parking just because of windows and unit layout. So we really tried to use the areas of the building that are effective for for residential dwelling units. A lot of the areas where we have parking are not. So.
Okay.
So, what would the body like to do with this application?
I don't feel like I understand the affordability component. Really, what are we getting out of this?
Is that a question for me?
I guess. Yeah, it's a question. It's a question. I understand what you're proposing, and I guess I am asking then staff again to clarify, maybe Lisa or Brian, will we be able to achieve what it is this you're sort of proffering, I suppose, 5 at 80% and 5 available housing vouchers available in the first 2 months. Is that how the process works? Brian's nodding.
Brian, you're nodding, but I think that means yes. That's the way it works.
Yes, that's the way staff understands it. And then as Commissioner Stolzenberg has mentioned several times recently, as a part of the development review process, we have to, if anytime there's affordable units that have been conditioned or offered, as in this case, there is our agreement that is, we actually just got a draft of the agreement from our staff today to review, that kind of lays out the guidelines. And a lot of that is done in so that the zoning administrator, should there a question come up about condition compliance on a special use permit, the zoning administrator has something to go on other than just kind of, the vague language of some of the conditions, but actually, the city and the applicant work together to come up with, kind of a formal agreement that lays out how this is going to work prior to getting a building permit, prior to any building coming out of the ground. We all understand what the applicant is going to do, and we have the agreement in hand that we can enforce.
So just so I understand this, Ms. Robinson, let me walk you through the way I think this works. We have approved, and council has approved, an SUP for residential and commercial development that will allow for 105 units. That has already been approved. What we're looking at is an amendment to add 15 more units. That's what we're voting on tonight. If we vote no, then we just simply revert back to what's already been approved with the affordable housing component in it that's already in it. We just revert back to what initially existed. And we in fact then lose 15 additional units.
That's right. I mean, ultimately it's council's decision. You all are making a recommendation. Yes, that's the way it would work.
Okay. So the additional 105 units and the affordable housing algorithm that exists, that's done effectively. And we're just working on getting 15 more units for the city of Charlottesville.
Right. Although, again, as the developer noted, there's some question about whether or not under the requirements of City Code 3412, whether or not there would be a requirement for even one affordable unit, if I understood the statements correctly. So
you mean one additional?
No.
Okay.
Even one.
But so because they've voluntarily offered these units, as we discussed with the first round of Thousand Monticello, these conditions are binding, right?
So what I want to have everybody understand, these are not proffers, which you can only take in a rezoning. But what we have been doing with special use permits is taking at face value what the developer represents to you within the application. And the benefit of having a special use permit approved, the benefit of that to a developer is that if the developer seeks an approval for a specific development that's been described in an application, then once that development is approved by you, once that SUP is approved, if you then change your zoning ordinance, they can still build the development as you have approved it. And so what we have been doing is making sure that as much as possible within your special use permit itself, we provide adequate details describing the specific development that's been approved. And often within the last couple of years, that specific development isn't simply described as a 6-story building with some commercial and some residential. Most of these applications at your urging are including representations that some number of units will be affordable. But we've gotten to the point where that term is almost a buzzword that has no meaning. Now, under our city regulations that apply to units that you get under section 3412, we have a standard operating procedure. You all may or may not like what's in there, but it's there. Those regulations require a recorded written document that runs with the land, in addition to any, a special use permit approval. You always say it runs with the land, but it's a zoning approval, so it can be changed at any time. Something that's recorded in the city's land records is something that binds subsequent owners of the property, all of that sort of thing. So when somebody says to you, you're going to get 5 units affordable at 80% AMI over a period of 10 years, I don't know if you all understand the administrative structure that has to be put in place to administer that. It's not something simple for the zoning administrator to just go magically figure this out. I mean, in a lot of ways, unless you have a zoning ordinance structure that requires written reports to be given to the city, it will be almost impossible for the zoning administrator, short of litigation, to get information about what's actually going on in a building. So this is the long-winded way of saying we have got to get to a new zoning ordinance as quickly as possible. We've been saying this for 5 years now. But in this particular instance, what I will say to you is this developer does own and operate a number of projects within the city that accept housing choice vouchers. They know how to administer that program. They have operated some affordable units for many, many years. And so this is a developer who does know how to do it and has experience administering vouchers within the city. And at this point, while there's some bumps in the road here, I think that certainly if you interpret the words as written, the requirement for housing choice vouchers, which necessarily comes with a specific rental amount, is certainly enforceable. As to the other provisions, is no more or no less affordable than any number of other projects that you've approved with things like that in the past. You are kind of stuck with that language until we get a new ordinance. If you want the possibility of units at all.
And just to supplement that with it's maybe more political than I'd like it to be, but I frankly have a lot of confidence in this developer and this developer's dedication to enhancing our affordable housing portfolio. And this developer is interested in our low wealth community. I mean, this developer served with me on the housing authority and demonstrated an interest in providing affordable housing when he did that.
Once you get to the point of rewriting your zoning ordinance, another option that's not used now, but will certainly be a possibility in a new ordinance, is that one of the options available to people would be to make leasing options or purchase options available to either the city or the housing authority. And so, down the road, you'll get to a place where instead of having a developer have to administer these things themselves, it may be easier to make those units available to the housing authority to administer or to something else, but we're not quite there yet. But it is a significant administrative undertaking. And while many developers are not people who have done it themselves, this is a developer who has operated and administered units that use vouchers. so they know how to do it.
So if I can maybe restate that so I'm kind of clear on exactly what's going on here. So we have these standard operating procedures that govern mandatory affordable units under 34-12, adopted per 34-12G. But because these are offered units and not mandatory under that, or perhaps one will be, those standard operating procedures don't automatically kick in. So instead, we're left with just the wording in this voluntarily offered condition, because it predates us talking about asking developers to voluntarily submit to those standard operating procedures, which include things like reporting requirements to the city. And so what we're left with under this condition are, it seems to be 5 units at 80% AMI for 10 years, which will presumably be administered more or less in accord with those requirements, but without kind of the teeth behind it. And then an additional separate 5 units that, because of the fact that the wording of it implies that they will be available for housing choice voucher recipients, will be available at rents that you can apply a housing voucher to, and then reserved for kind of first dibs for the voucher holders. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think my inclination, in particular with what Chair Mitchell said, we already stepped in this one a year and change ago with the first 105 units, and that's kind of done and gone. And this is for an additional 15 units on top. It's kind of a no-brainer that we would allow it. So I'm inclined to support it and say that we should approve the SUP. But I would really urge staff and the applicant to consider formalizing those affordability offers into something that makes more sense and isn't ambiguous, where we go back a year later and don't know what's going on. Similarly to how the 1000 Monticello project a few months ago had much more specific regulations based on those standard operating procedures put as part of it. But I'm comfortable leaving that to staff and the applicant to work out between us and council, rather than suggesting that we wait for that to happen, if that makes sense to you all.
Would you like to put that in the form of a motion?
Yes.
And as you're crafting that, think about whether you want to include the staff recommendations in that motion as well.
Yes. I mean, I guess the question is, do we want to make any changes to the exact wording of those conditions 2 and 3 in order to memorialize some of what we just discussed, or if that's even possible?
Is C missing a component of commercial on Harris?
I didn't quite get that. Would you repeat that?
Commercial. The condition C says the commercial space on the ground floor of the building shall be designed, blah blah blah, for retail uses facing Allied Street. And we just heard that it also is. There's a plan that there would be commercial on Harris as well.
So you would revise that to say Allied and Harris.
That would be. I would recommend that.
And to ask the applicant, was the commercial facing Harris Street specifically planned to be retail, or was that just unspecified commercial?
That's a good point. Unspecified commercial. Retail might be a little limiting. Thank you.
Okay. Does anyone else have other thoughts on conditions?
I might recommend that, given all of the discussion you've had, it might be good to revise the 3rd condition to say that during the first 2 months for which the building leases dwelling units, The landowner shall reserve 5 units for lease by housing choice voucher holders at rents that allow the vouchers to be utilized.
Okay. And does it make sense to add something there? Maybe a stupid question. Requiring like notifying the housing authority that those are available so that they're not silently reserved and then held for 2 months and then rented on market rate? Is that reasonable and legal?
I think that would be a reasonable condition.
Okay, well then I would like to make the following motion. I move to recommend approval of a special use permit allowing the specific development proposed within the application materials for SP 21-00001, subject to the following reasonable conditions and safeguards. The conditions presented in the staff report with the following modifications. 1B, the commercial space on the ground floor of the building facing Allied Street shall be designed, occupied, and used for retail uses, and commercial space facing Harris Street shall be in the building. The rest as specified. And then condition 3, during the first 2 months for which the building leases dwelling units, the landowner shall reserve 5 units for lease by housing choice voucher holders at rents that allow vouchers to be attached, and provide notification to the Charlottesville Redevelopment and Housing Authority that such units are available.
Any seconds?
I second.
And we have a motion and we have a second. Is there any further discussion? Ms. Creasy?
Yes, Mr. Lindero,
Aye.
Mr. Sola Yates,
Aye.
Ms. Dow,
Aye.
Mr. Heaton,
Aye.
Mr. Stolensberg,
Aye.
Ms. Russell,
Aye.
and Mr. Mitchell.
And yes, and the recommendation goes to council unanimously. All right, Ms. Creasy, I think we've completed our agenda for the evening.
We have.
All right, so we are effectively a wrap. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Raise your hand if you agree. Want to go home, say goodnight. All right, we are adjourned, Ms. Creasy. Thank you very much. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Alex.
Bye, everybody.
Have a good
Good
night.
night.
Lisa.